Hey guys, it's Mr. Evans. I just wanted to give you guys a quick tutorial on doing your dialectical journals because we haven't done any in a while, and I feel like I want to make sure that we've refreshed your memory and that you know what you need to do. And another thing too, I've noticed in the past that some of you spend probably too much time putting them together, so I'm going to try and give you a couple of shortcuts when you're putting this together so that you're using your time effectively. So this is the example that I gave you guys earlier this year about how to set it up. I'm going to do mine in a Word document just so you can see it on the screen as I'm working through it. So you're going to want to put the title of the reading up there and then the pages. Make sure your name is on there and the period. Title it Dialectical Journal. Now with our Dialectical Journal, we're going to want to divide the page into, well, halves if you're working on notebook paper. Since I'm not working on notebook paper, I'm going to actually divide it into thirds. Then I'm going to set up 3 columns that I'm going to use. This first column over here is going to be for my page and paragraph numbers. If you're doing it on notebook paper, that can go over in the margin. Then I'm going to need a section for my quotes and a section for my responses. So I can go ahead and label this page and paragraph number, quotes, responses. You can do this if you're somebody who's good on a computer. It might even be worth it for you to do it like this, because then you can copy and paste your quotes and just drop them in there. I want to give you some shortcuts though if you're typing them out. So just for example, our next reading that we're going to be doing is on Andrew Jackson, and as you're doing this reading, you're supposed to be going through and you're supposed to be looking for how Jackson makes decisions, what kind of decisions he makes with regard to the Indians, so that you can kind of evaluate him as a leader. Now let's say I was going through and I wanted to use a quote about Jackson and the Indians. So let's say I use this one right here on page 107. This is the second paragraph. And it says, over the next 10 years, Jackson was involved in many more treaties with Southern Indians. Through force, bribery, and tricks, he helped whites take over 3/4 of Alabama and Florida, 1/3 of Tennessee, and parts of 4 other states. These land grabs became the basis for the Cotton Kingdom in the South, where slaves labored on white-owned plantations. So let's say I was going to use this first big chunk. So this is a big, I've got 2 sentences here. One of them is a really long sentence where they list off all these parts, but it seems important if I'm going to judge how he treated the Indians and the decisions that he made. So I want to start off by go ahead and labeling it. So this is page 107. Say paragraph sec 2. So I'll label that like that. Now, I can do a couple of things. If I want to try and copy and paste it, I probably can do this from a Word document or from the PDF. When I paste it, I want to do it as text only. Boom. So there it all is. I might have to go in and make a couple little edits. That's a quick way that you can get the whole amount of text that you want to use. Now, let's say you're doing this on notebook paper and you don't want to write all that out because it's going to take a really long time and because you're going to have the copy in front of you. So if you need to refer to it, you can refer to it. So the other way that you could do it would be you could type in the first couple words. Do periods like this, and then states like that, and end it like that. Then you know when you go to refer back to it that you're covering everything from where it says over the next 10 years all the way down to where it ends with other states. Another way that you could do it would be, instead of doing an abbreviated quote like that, you probably should put quotation symbols in there so that I know it's a quote, it's not paraphrasing. The other way that you could do it would be to try and paraphrase it. Now, if you can paraphrase it, that can be a little harder because then you got to think of it. You got to try and summarize it in a little bit shorter. So we could look that over and we could say, making treaties, Jackson used force, bribery, and tricks to gain control of large parts of the Southeast. Alright, I'm keeping the bare bones of it and I'm paraphrasing it. You could try that too. To me, sometimes that's a little harder because you got to think of it, and you got to summarize it, and you got to process it a little bit. So those are the different ways that you can do it. Now for your responses, you have lots of things that you can do for your responses. As I've said before, you can ask a question. This would be a question that can't be answered by your quote, but it is a question that's sort of prompted by your quote, something that you'd have to research further to help you understand. Analyzing would be where you look at it and you break down the various parts. Now, something like this, you would probably want to look at the whole original quote. Just copy and paste it again. You got to make sure when you're pasting this stuff, you paste it as text only. If you try and do the formatting, it's going to come out all wonky. So if you're going to analyze, you would be looking at this and breaking down individual parts. What exactly was meant by force? What exactly was meant by bribery? What exactly was meant by tricks? And break down a part of it. Interpreting would be where you try and explain the meaning of this and how it relates to the greater picture. Evaluating would be where you kind of judge these actions and decide if this was a really good thing to do, if it was useful, if it helped him accomplish his goals. There's a lot of ways that you can evaluate it. Reflecting would be where you explain your own personal thoughts or opinions. Maybe you look at this and you say, well, no, these sound like the kind of things that criminals do. This doesn't sound right. And then you could write about that. A personal connection would be where you write about something that you see and hear and how it reminds you about something that you've learned elsewhere or that you've experienced in your life. Maybe it reminds you of something else you've learned in class. Maybe it reminds you of something that you heard about in the news recently. Maybe it just reminds you of something in your life, and you write about that personal connection. Drawing or illustration, that's kind of self-explanatory over here. I'm not a big fan of summarizing the text, so I prefer that you don't do that. You can also predict the effect. You can look at this and you can say, okay, this is what's going to happen because of this. Since it did happen, what's going to happen in the future. And you can make your prediction over here. My preference is you don't use any of these more than once or twice for each reading. I don't want you repeating the same one over and over again. Okay? If you want to do it on a Word document like this while you're looking at it, if that helps you, that's fine. Just make sure you do your pages and your paragraph numbers, especially if you're not copying the whole quotes, so that you know where to refer back to. Now, whenever you decide to write your response over here, you want to make sure that when you write your response, that you put what type of response you're giving. So let's say I was reflecting on this. So I'll type reflecting. And let's say I read this and I decide, you know what, I feel like this sounds like Jackson is kind of acting like a criminal. He's using the tactics that criminals use. So tactics like force, bribery, and tricks are associated with criminals or maybe people who know their actions are morally wrong. And just put your response in like that. But make sure you put in what type of response that you're giving. That's one of the things that I look for when I go to examine it. Hope this tutorial helps you guys out.